services. That is why this bill was so important. So one of the aspects of the bill would have guaranteed that a resident currently residing in a nursing home who has to give up their home and give up all of their personal assets to be there, the bill would have guaranteed that we couldn't just put that person on the streets. The bill required that there was a very clear care plan in place and that services in the community were identified and in place for that person before they moved. That's just one example, and the best example I could give you of why this bill was needed in this transition from one system to another. So now we have a situation where we have no protection from the hiccups. And unfortunately, in this case, hiccups could cost real lives. And it's unfortunate that everybody in that chamber today didn't realize the importance of that. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to stand with you.
Jackie Algie, why don't you come up next?
Sure. Thank you.
Tell everybody who you are, what
I
you
will.
do.
Spell it too.
Yeah, spell your names. folks.
Sure. My name is spelled J-A-Q-U-I-E. My last name is spelled A-L-G-E-E. I'm Jackie Algie. I am a member and vice president of Service Employees International Union Healthcare, Illinois. I'm proud to stand here and say that we represent over 52,000 child care and home care workers who provide services to seniors, people with disabilities, and our children every day. Let me be clear that no one bears more responsibility today for the defeat of this legislation, which protected or protects our children and child care and home care in Illinois, than Representative Ken Dunkin himself. To serve himself politically, Representative Dunkin took a child in his arms several weeks ago when a delegation of us met with him. He took a child in his arms from a child care provider, and he looked at that child, he looked at the delegation, including myself, and promised to vote in favor and support of this bill. And today, he not only broke that promise to his constituents, but he broke it to me and people like me. He also showed that he is willing to use vulnerable people as political pawns, along with our governor. 2 months ago, Representative Esther Golar came to Springfield and made voting for Senate Bill 570, her last act in the House. Today, Representative Dunkin betrayed her legacy and betrayed the constituency that he now serves. And he swore to serve when he took office. The backroom deals that he's continuing to make with our governor for his own personal gain do not remove the threat caused by Rauner to these programs. But if we learned one thing today, we learned that we cannot trust his promise. We cannot trust his word. One more note I'd like to add is that the devastation that Bruce Rauner sought by rule today, he is seeking at the bargaining table with demands that will harm our workforce. Today, I would like to show you and share with you a picture of Representative Dunkin taking that child in his arm and promising to vote the right way, promising to vote morally right for the people of this state. And today he proved to us that we cannot depend and trust his word. Thank you, Speaker.
Amber,
Can you guys hear me okay? All right. My name is Amber Smock. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Access Living. I'll spell my name just in case that went by you. So my first name is Amber, A-M-B-E-R, and my last name is Smock, S-M-O-C-K. And I work for Access Living, A-C-C-E-S-S. That's not E-X-C-E-S-S, okay? But it's Access Living. Okay, so first we would like to thank Speaker Madigan and the House of Representatives for their actions over the last several months to protect 34,000 people with disabilities and seniors from losing home services due to the Dawn score change. Today, the Illinois House presented the mandatory veto of House Bill 2482 for an override vote, and although the vote did not pass, all of the Centers for Independent Living in Illinois will continue to work with the governor's office and with the House and the Senate to protect the home services program and the community care program to ensure the right of people with disabilities to receive well-funded supports in inclusive, community-based settings. These efforts will include working with the state and federal government to ensure that the waiver, the Persons with Disabilities waiver, the 1915C waiver, provides home and community-based services to people who need them. When the override failed to pass, all of the advocates for home services in Illinois, we should feel proud of ourselves, because the constant effort to teach elected officials about a very obscure assessment, the constant effort to teach people what that meant to people with disabilities, it had a huge impact. And so today, throughout state government, elected officials demonstrated that they are concerned about home and community-based services for people with disabilities. The floor debate also discussed the establishment of a state task force on the Dawn score. We at Access Living and our fellow Centers for Independent Living asked that we be included on the task force, of course. For right now, that's our statement. Thank you to the Speaker for allowing us to speak.
And also with us, Gail Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, and everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Gail Hamilton, and I've been a home care provider for over a decade just here in Springfield. And my life has been directly affected by Governor Rauner's devastating cuts in today's action in the General Assembly. The bills to restore the child care and home care eligibility were necessary pieces of policy to provide long-term solutions, and they clearly moved the governor to reverse course and backtrack. As Bruce Rauner knows, these bills had broad bipartisanship support and were moved after widespread outcry from across Illinois. And these changes came as a result of extraordinary interference by the governor with programs that have contributed to our economy. They've saved taxpayers money and have given dignity and respect and help to vulnerable people. These bills were necessary bills because the governor chose to abuse his executive power and use administrative rules to begin a backdoor destruction of these programs. These bills were necessary to make sure that this governor, any governor, cannot abuse their executive power again. Legislators had no choice but to act today, and we definitely applaud them. Governor Rauner has moved to cut his own backdoor deal on both child care and home care as a way to save face as moderate Republicans broke with his extreme and damaging position. We moved Governor Rauner to action. We moved moderate Republicans. We moved our Democratic allies with other advocates. But now Governor Rauner wants credit for this. It's shameful to me that Governor Rauner wants credit for restoring the programs that he cut. It is laughable and predictable given the willingness of Bruce Rauner to play politics with the lives of vulnerable people. I take care of people in their late 70s and 80s with various medical diagnoses, from Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and everywhere in between, including a retired pastor. These people did not ask to be used as these political pawns, and taking away care from them was not the way to solve our budget crisis. Today's votes show that a majority of legislators not only have a conscience and want this governor to reverse course and release the human hostages he is holding across Illinois. But they want long-term protections for the most vulnerable people in our state. Thank you.
Rather than show you how adept I've become at reading my statement, I'll just take questions. You're up, number one.
All right. Speaker, you're here and you've stood alongside listening to remarks that these individuals have made, in particular against Representative Ken Dunkin, a member of your caucus. Can you talk about what your conversations with him have been? Are you going to support him in this upcoming election, or does he bear responsibility for this defeat of the child care and Don measures?
The last time I spoke to Mr. Duncan was 1 week before the vote on the union arbitration bill where he was not in the chamber. That's the last time I've spoken to Mr. Duncan.
Have you reached out to him?
I attempted to reach him on the day of the vote on the union arbitration bill, and he declined to take the call.
Not since at all?
We haven't spoken since
Have
a
you
week
tried
before.
since?
No, I haven't attempted to talk to him.
Will you support him in the election?
Well, that's something that we'll consider as we move along.
Do you share the sentiment, though, that he bears responsibility for the failures of these bills?
You know, Mr. Duncan has now missed 3 votes where he apparently supported the governor's position. And I really think you ought to direct all of your questions to Mr. Duncan.
Boy, it seems like he's the one who's not following the leader. There was some talk up there in the House, I don't know if you heard about, boy, you blindly follow the leader, and it sounds like Representative Duncan's Exhibit A.
Day to day, week to week, month to month in the House, I attempt to work with every member of the Democratic caucus. And my goal in working with the members of the Democratic caucus is to understand their interest, their positions on bills and issues, and to fashion a workable position among all of the members of the House Democratic caucus. The idea that I just issue unilateral rules day in and day out is just, it's pretty laughable. If you're familiar with how this caucus works and the people that are in the caucus and the positions that they would freely articulate to you.
Do you
Yeah.
see the moves that Governor Rauner has made in the past couple of days when it comes to the Don and child care, this budgetary measure? Is that compromise? I mean, Republicans say, this is an olive branch.
well, I
Now
think-
it's your turn, Democrats.
I think that Gail Hamilton spoke very well. She spoke very well to what happened. In my judgment, there was a wellspring of sentiment against the governor's actions all over Illinois, communicated to every member of the legislature, including Republicans. And that level of discontent is communicated by certain Republicans to the governor, in my judgment, brought him to do what he did.
What's the difference between what the governor wanted to do and everything that happened upstairs today? Where the governor supposedly is talking about, oh, I'm compromising, and, you didn't get all the votes up there today.
Well, today is today, and then tomorrow is tomorrow, and, we've all learned that you just take these things day by day, and what's important for me is not to lose sight of the ultimate goal. And I've spoken to that consistently, and that would be a balanced budget using a balanced approach of cuts in new revenue to provide a budget for Illinois that would provide help and support for the vulnerable in the society and middle-class families in Illinois. That's my goal, and I don't plan to lose sight of that goal.
Speaker, you said that the reason for this was because some of his own Republican legislators came to him and said, hey, we can't be with you. Is there going to be, moving forward, any effort by you or members of your caucus to reach out to those same Republican legislators to try to forge some sort of bipartisan consensus?
I'm more than interested in a balanced approach to eliminating the budget deficit. And I welcome the support of every member of the General Assembly in that effort. I've said consistently, number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. When the credit rating agencies critique the fiscal condition of the state of Illinois, they don't talk about workers' compensation, they don't talk about collective bargaining, they don't talk about prevailing wage. They talk about money in and money out, and they say there's not enough money coming in to pay for the money going out, and that the state has to get about the business of not only eliminating the current budget deficit, but the structural deficits that were carried forward, the unfunded liability in the pension systems, and the total aggregated debt load of the state of Illinois. That's the job at hand.
Okay, but that really wasn't my question.
Well-
The question is, do you think that let me rephrase it. Do you think that it's possible going forward to start working with Republicans in the House who were vocal behind the scenes
Yeah.
with the government?
It's possible to solve this problem if people are not functioning in the extreme. We have to function in moderation. Everybody has to be reasonable. Now, I heard a lot of Republicans in floor debate today talking about not being in the extreme. So apparently they're listening to somebody. Apparently that message is penetrating them. So that's good. And the more of them that attempt to move away from extreme positions, like attempting to leverage the budget making, which affects all of these people, for changes in workers' compensation, collective bargaining, prevailing wage, in my judgment, is extreme.
I came in a little late, I apologize while Pat was talking. Is it fair to say then that the advocates up here believe that these bills that didn't pass or weren't overridden today are necessary, that, in other words, what the governor has done, what he calls compromises on child care or the Don score issue, doesn't go far enough?
These people were very eloquent in explaining why they supported these bills. For my part, let me say that my interest in these two areas, the Don score and in child care, would be to attain certainty for the recipients in the program. So let's take child care. The governor assumed office in January. His first request was an adjustment to the FY15 budget, a correction to the FY15 budget. He claimed that the FY15 budget was out of balance. My caucus did not want to cooperate with him. I persuaded my caucus that we should cooperate with him. We should work with him to do a correction in the FY15 budget. Now, the general nature of the governor's request on that FY15 budget correction was to lower the level of appropriation all across the board in the budget. That was the general nature of his request. There were two exceptions. Number one, he wanted to increase the appropriation for the Department of Corrections. Number two, he wanted to increase the appropriation for child care. And that was in the bill. When the final bill was adopted, there was an increase in the appropriation for the child care program. That having been done in response to his request, he then proceeded to file an administrative rule, which, according to Representative David Harris today, cut the program by about 72%. That lasted for several months through the summer, and within the last few days, he filed yet another rule so that the cut in the estimation of Mr. Harris is about 10%. My point is there's been inconsistency throughout the last several months. And if you're a recipient in this program, if you're any of these people that work in this program, what you want is certainty. And that's what the legislation would provide. It would provide certainty, and the same goal applies to the Don score.
In the past, you said that the governor has made U-turns. Do you consider these U-turns, and are you maybe seeing this and saying, hey, well, he can U-turn on a couple other things then?
Well, I think that, again, Gail Hamilton spoke to this very, very well, that the governor heard a lot of noise coming from all across the state of Illinois. He may have heard it directly, or he may have heard it through Republican legislators, and he made a legislative judgment. Well, let's take some action. Let's take some action to be responsive to what we're hearing from the people of the state of Illinois. If he would listen a little more closely, he would stop talking about workers' compensation, collective bargaining, prevailing wage, because if you're out among the people of Illinois, they're not interested in the government of Illinois working to lower wages and the standard of living and forcing injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. The people of Illinois don't believe that the government ought to be in the business of depressing wages and the standard of living. If they believe anything in terms of governmental action in this area, they would say the government ought to be about the business of raising wages, raising the standard of living. That's been the history of the American government since 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt assumed the presidency.
Are these deals in any way, could you see them at all as progress of a greater deal to come? Whatever the reason is that he did it, I mean,
Yeah.
he did, is it progress?
Sure. I'm very happy for those that will be restored to the child care program. I'm not happy that there are some that will not be restored to the child care program. I'm very happy that some people may benefit from his change on the Don score, but we've had testimony here tonight that it's not sufficient. And again, let me emphasize certainty. You know, if you're a person that's dependent upon the government because you're vulnerable, you're poor, you're disabled, you're elderly, the last thing you need in your life is uncertainty. That's the last thing you need. And that's what you've had over several months.
Are you gonna do the unemployment insurance bill?
There's been so much talk about compromise, and I'm guessing that what you would say about some of these so-called compromises that came out of the governor's office this week, but there is also the sentiment that Democrats haven't moved, and if you just throw him a bone, that perhaps he's not gonna push for prevailing wage and all those other things, that he needs to walk away with the win. Are you willing to give him anything so that we can all rise out of this?
I think the people that ought to win are the people of Illinois, especially the people that need the government, the vulnerable, the poor, the elderly, the disabled. Those are the people that ought to win out of all of this. And I want to disagree with you on the question of compromise. So I've said this before. I think I've attempted to meet the governor halfway. The governor talks about workers' compensation. The House has passed a workers' compensation bill that does changes in the workers' compensation system. There could be additional items put in that bill. An important feature of that bill is that it would subject the insurance companies in Illinois that sell workers' compensation insurance to regulation. I think regulation is needed because you probably know there's a recent study by the Workers' Compensation Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it found that today the cost of workers' compensation insurance in Illinois has fallen below the cost in Indiana and Wisconsin. Now, the rates haven't come down. This study would say the costs have come down. If the rates haven't come down, that means that the insurance companies are making too much money. So on workers' compensation, the House has passed a bill. The governor wants to privatize the administration of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The House has passed a bill to do that. We had one simple request in the bill. We said, Governor, many states have privatized their economic development agencies, and there's mixed results all across the nation. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't work well. And given that, we'd like to have a sunset in the bill. We'd like to say, look, you want to privatize, we'll agree with the privatization, but in 3 years' time, there'll be a mandatory review of how this is working. Next, the governor has called for a freeze on property taxes. In the House, we've called the bill 15 times. 15 times we've called the bill to freeze property taxes. On almost all occasions, about 40 Democrats have voted for the bill, close to 0 Republicans have voted for the bill. Next, the governor requested that the members of the legislature not take an anticipated COLA adjustment. We moved the bill, the governor signed the bill, it suspended an anticipated COLA adjustment and kept at a reduced level the travel allowance and the per diem allowance that members of the legislature get. Next, the governor requested that we pass an appropriation bill that would do the federal money only, which we did, and state money for McCormick Place in Chicago. So those are 5 instances, in my judgment, where I've met the governor halfway. If there's further opportunities, I would certainly entertain them.
What about the unemployment insurance agreement? Are you going to run that today?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, you used the word inconsistent, and Amanda used the word U-turn, and, you know, we've been following Bruce Rauner for a couple of years, and I can't really figure out what it's all about. What do you think it's all about? If you were to look any of these folks in the eye, you'd say, oh, I'm working for you. I really want it to happen. But what do you think he's all about?
When you figure it out, would you let me know?
Did you,
Maybe you could write a book about it.
did the governor's office ask for things in Moylan's bill over the weekend?
The governor's office has submitted a list of requests in an appropriation bill, and we're more than willing to consider that and to talk further with the governor about their request for
Well,
appropriation.
they sent that to you Sunday, right? How come you couldn't get that?
I'm not quite sure when they sent it. We're in the 5th or the 6th month of this, and they could have sent that 5 months ago. But, you know, they chose to send it on Sunday.
What do you think about that? You know, Rauner has said all along that he doesn't want to fund things piecemeal, and now
Yeah,
here
yeah.
he's pushing this. Is that a contradiction, or is it movement?
In May, the legislature sent a spending plan to the governor. In our judgment, that spending plan helped and protected middle-class families by providing support and subsidy for local school districts, local police and fire, local road programs. Under the Illinois Constitution, the governor could have used his line item veto or his reduction veto to fashion that spending plan to his liking. Basically, he chose not to do that. His basic action was to veto the entire spending plan, with the exception of elementary and secondary education and the capital appropriation bill where he exercised a line item veto. He could have used the line item veto and the reduction veto to fashion that spending plan to his liking. And a lot of these matters which are before the legislature today on requests for appropriations would be law. He could have done that. So as an example, the request that the governor sent over the weekend, that was all in the spending plan. Those are other state funds. They're not general revenue.
Right, but that was May, and this is now. I mean, don't we
Yeah.
want movement? I mean, he's
Well,
moving forward. don't we
there
want
was
support?
movement in May. He's familiar with his power under the Constitution because he exercised it on the capital appropriation bill. He could have used that power all through that spending plan.
Are you going to the great summit, pre-turkey summit?
And what are your expectations for it?
I'm anxious to be there. I'm anxious to be there.
Does that mean you will be there?
Oh, I plan to be there, sure.
Have you seen an agenda yet? Because they're going to agree.
Well, you know that there was a letter from the governor where he claimed that he would do the agenda, and that the people that had first called for the meeting disagreed with that. My view would be that there ought to be interaction with the people that called for the meeting in terms of drafting the agenda.
So has that been settled yet? Have you heard?
It hasn't been settled, but you know we're very anxious about this. We're very anxious to be. We hope you're there too.
What's
Let
the
me ask,
purpose of it?
why would you suggest that it be a public meeting when, obviously, the work gets done behind closed doors for
Well, the work is not being done behind closed doors. The work is not being done behind closed doors because you've got the governor advocating an extreme agenda. That's why the work is not being done behind closed doors.
What do you
Well,
expect?
with 4305, how,
That bill was,
how's,
The appropriate.
I'm sorry,
Moylan's
the appropriation,
appropriate.
how serious are you about wanting to get that done? Why, there's already questions of why it wasn't on a vehicle bill. Now it has to go through 3 different days, et cetera. There were some Republicans raising the questions of whether it would be funded by the end of the year.
sure. Look, we offered the bill. Mr. Moylan worked on the bill for a long time. He took requests from various sources, and, we called the bill. It was only within 1 or 2 days that the governor decided to support the bill, which I think would speak to, again, people saying to the governor, let's get reasonable here. Let's not be functioning in the extreme.
Mr. Speaker, if I could bring the topic back to Representative Duncan, what's to your advantage or your organization's advantage of allowing other folks behind the microphone there just a moment ago to say negative things about it?
What's your question?
The question is, why would you let people say negative things about a member of your caucus, Representative Duncan?
Do you really think that I tell House Democrats what they can say and what they can't say?
I'm talking about these other folks that you're sharing the list with.
Advocates.
Right now, these other.
Oh, these
Yeah.
and your question again?
This is your show. What's it to your advantage, or the House Democrats' advantage, for you to allow your cohorts in front of me
Well.
to denounce Representative Duncan and say he's a bad guy?
Our purpose in asking these people to join us today was to speak to the details of these bills. So I'm somewhat familiar with both bills. Clearly, I'm not as familiar as the people that are standing behind me. And our purpose was to spend time with you and to make sure that there was a clear understanding of the details of both bills. That's the purpose. Now, these people are like you. They're citizens of the United States of America. They're protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. And until further notice, they're able to say what they want to say.
Speaker, at the end of today, which I know the House is still in and such, but just, is Illinois any closer to a budget and to a compromise and to a deal? Or are we the same as where we're at after today and really the past couple of days?
Yeah, I think there's a mixed answer. I mean, obviously, the governor has restored some programs. That's good. But we're still a long way away from a final resolution. Again, had he signed the May spending plan with changes through the line item veto and the reduction veto, a lot of things would be in place.
He predicted last week that there could be some movement in January when the vote threshold drops, suggesting that perhaps Democrats would run their own version of the spending plan again.
Well, if he weren't functioning in the extreme, there could be action today. Wouldn't have to wait until January.
Okay, thanks, everybody. And thank all of you.
Yeah.
We almost got through the whole thing anyway.
Yeah, there's been rumors about that.
I get it.
I just collected it all up.
Yeah. Don't talk to him. Don't talk to him.
Hey, yo, I got you. Catch that? See that? That's the second time today.
What? I missed that.
Don't talk. That's the second time we said that today. Thank you, Speaker. The second time.
Is that what you use it as advertising about?
Tony, give me a clip.
We are feared.
Leaders Durkin and Redonia will be in a few minutes.
I just.
Oh, sure, I'm sure.
They should be about 5 minutes, I think.
I'm all right. I want to see a picture.
I didn't go.
I didn't go trick or treat.
What was Colby, Mike?
Daniel Tiger, which is it's like a Mr. Yeah, it's a Mr. Rogers.
And the men don't wear pajama pants, but the women do.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Wears his watch
Mike.
inside his sweatshirt.
Does your daughter realize that the men, Tigers don't wear pajama pants?
What?
They don't wear pajama pants. The women have to, but the men can get away without wearing them.
Oh, so you doing another sexist,
Boycott.
yeah. I hadn't heard that come up.
That's what I wanted to see a picture of.
Statement
took a picture of what.
I just wanna be cool, I'm less interested in it, I've seen the mansion before.
No, I'm talking about what.
Your kid.
What they gave out,
Oh.
which was a lot.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting. Oh, that is a good. I think it's just Jack Lang.
I don't know. Yeah, that's what.
That ain't bad.
We're not. What?
Were you here last night?
That's not a processed.
No, I wasn't.